Senator Ricketts. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Rubio. Good to be with you again. My basic question is, what are we doing here? What is the point? What is the goal of this hearing?
How do I know?
As you know well, having served on this dais alongside me for 14 years, this is an oversight hearing. And the purpose of oversight is to encourage, if necessary, to compel consultation between the administration and Congress.
This exchange between Senator Chris Coons and Secretary Marco Rubio is one of those moments that doesn't explode into viral shouting clips. But honestly, it's way more important than that. Because what Coons is doing here isn't grandstanding. He's asking the most basic, uncomfortable question Congress is supposed to ask when military force gets used.
And I just wanted to raise with you at the outset, of course the Commander-in-Chief has, under Article 2, the power to defend the American people against an imminent threat or an incoming attack. How else could we be kept safe? But our Article 1 power requires consultation. I'll agree with all of my colleagues. Nicolas Maduro's a bad guy. He was indicted. There was a bounty on his head over several administrations. His removal, flawlessly executed by American troops, thankfully none of them hurt, did cost the lives of 75 to 100 Venezuelans and Cubans, was a dangerous and high-risk maneuver. I am glad that it ended as well as it possibly could. But the point here that I want to make first is that it was rehearsed for months. The administration had a number of contingencies it was trying to navigate through. But over the course of months, when the administration was taking strike after strike after strike against drug trafficking boats, in several instances where senior leaders of the administration briefed this committee and others, we were told that military action to remove Maduro was not on the table, that the campaign to try and deter drug trafficking was not going to include the exact military action that followed. Yet it was being rehearsed. If there was time to practice, there was time to consult. And consulting with Congress is not just some high-minded principle, not some abstract thing, not a nice to have. It's a got to have. And look, the chairman opened by saying that this was limited in scope and duration, that it was executed flawlessly, and we should all be happy about the result. That much I agree with. But our president continues to threaten Delcy Rodriguez and the remnant of the Maduro regime with military force if they don't comply. We should know. What are the policies? What is the path? What is the plan forward? You and I both know the long and painful history of wars that began and seemed to be resolved and then opened up into excruciating, expensive, years-long conflicts. In Iraq in particular, in Libya and elsewhere, things do not always go as planned. And so consultation with Congress that is truthful and forthcoming and transparent is critical. In your service in this body, you knew that, you experienced it. I was in the room as you held to account members of previous administrations for not coming forward as they should have. So, look, in order to avoid our men and women in our armed forces going into harm's way, doubting whether they have the support of the Congress, consultation, hearings, and deliberations are required. I understand the risk of leaks. That's a risk every administration takes. But at the end of the day, our framers entrusted the power of the declaration of war to this body, not to the executive. And where there is the time to consult, there has to be consultation. Second, I just wanted to talk about allies and alliances. I was just in Europe. I led a bipartisan delegation, as Senator Shaheen referenced, to Denmark. And our president's comments about NATO, about Denmark, and his attempts to coerce Denmark into giving up Greenland are appalling. They profoundly harmed our security. And I am asking you to do everything you can to reinforce our commitment to NATO. I was concerned that you just said NATO needs to be reimagined. Let's just be clear about the record. You know as well as I, Article 5 has only been invoked once, and it was in defense of us after we were attacked. Danes and soldiers from almost every other NATO ally deployed and served, fought and died. 52 days. And for me, the most emotional moment of my visit to Denmark was laying a wreath at the memorial to the Danes who served, fought, and died alongside Americans. So when our president says we never asked for anything from NATO, and they never gave us anything, and you suggest that they aren't carrying their weight, whether it's in bases or in access or in troops or in service, it is allies that will keep us safe in the Indo-Pacific. Our treaty allies, Korea and Japan and Australia and the Philippines, are going to be critical to Indo-Pacific security against our principal threat, China, and in Europe. I'm worried that the very foundations of trust are being shaken. Our democracy depends on consultation with Congress that is truthful and timely, and the confidence of our allies depends on them knowing where we're going next. Today, an armada is steaming towards Iran. Our president is on social media threatening Iran, and I hope I can count on you, Mr. Secretary, to consult with us and inform us before our next actions, whether against Nigeria, Colombia, Cuba, Iran, or anywhere else. And I hope and believe that I can count on you to reinforce the sanctity of NATO, not to reimagine it, but to reinforce it.
The reason this exchange should matter to anyone watching, regardless of party, is because it exposes a tension that sits at the heart of American democracy and never really goes away. Who decides when force is used? Who asks the hard questions before the first strike, not after the press release? And who is willing to slow things down when momentum is pushing everyone to just move forward and deal with the consequences later? Senator Coons isn't pretending the world is simple or safe. He's not naive about bad actors or threats. What he's pushing back against is something far more dangerous than any one regime: the normalization of sidelining Congress when it becomes inconvenient. Because once consultation becomes optional, accountability becomes cosmetic. And history shows us that when oversight is treated as a box to check instead of a responsibility to honor, the costs don't fall on the people making the decisions. They fall on service members, on civilians, on taxpayers, on future generations who inherit conflicts they never voted for. What makes this moment especially striking is that it's not coming from someone outside the system. It's coming from someone who understands the machinery of government and knows exactly how easily it can drift off course when urgency replaces deliberation. Coons is essentially saying, we've seen this movie before. We know how it starts, and we know how it ends. It starts with secrecy, justified by security. It continues with success framed as proof that the process didn't matter. And it ends with years of escalation that no one originally planned for. And that's why his emphasis on honesty matters so much. Not just consultation in name, but consultation that is truthful, timely, and complete. Because misleading Congress isn't a minor procedural issue. It breaks the feedback loop that's supposed to prevent catastrophic mistakes. On the alliance front, the warning is just as serious. Alliances are not charity. They're force multipliers. They're deterrents. They're the reason adversaries think twice instead of acting first. When leaders casually undermine NATO or suggest our partners are freeloaders, they aren't projecting strength, they're signaling unpredictability. And unpredictability is not a strategy, it's a liability. The image Coons paints, standing in Denmark, honoring soldiers who died defending us, cuts through the rhetoric in a way talking points never can, because those sacrifices weren't abstract. They were real, and they were made based on trust that the United States meant what it said when it signed treaties and invoked shared defense. When that trust erodes, rebuilding it isn't easy. Sometimes it isn't even possible. At its core, this hearing wasn't about relitigating one military operation. It was about whether the guardrails still matter, whether Congress still functions as a co-equal branch, and whether we've learned anything at all from the wars that reshaped this century. Oversight isn't about tying a president's hands. It's about making sure those hands are guided by law, by consent, and by collective judgment, not secrecy and impulse. If we stop demanding that, then hearings like this stop being uncomfortable, and that's when we should really be worried. Because democracy doesn't usually collapse in one dramatic moment. It erodes quietly, decision by decision, exception by exception, until the norms that once protected us are gone. And what Senator Coons is doing here, calmly, firmly, without theatrics, is reminding everyone that those norms only survive if someone is willing to defend them before it's too late. That's why this exchange matters. That's why oversight matters. And that's why paying attention to moments like this isn't optional, it's essential. As always, thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting, hit that like button, subscribe for more content like this, and we'll see you next time.